Colorado Territory, 1870. Dust spiraled like golden ghosts through the shafts of sunlight that pierced the abandoned cabin's weathered planks. Zeke Zachary stood motionless in the doorway, his lean frame silhouetted against the harsh mountain light. The deserted mining settlement of Silverhorn had been dead for nearly a decade. Yet someone had left their mark here, hidden beneath loose floorboards, a leather-bound journal filled with lovesick poetry that would change everything he believed about his family's past. Found something worth keeping? The voice startled him. Zeke whirled around, nearly dropping the journal. Madeline Novak stood framed in the doorway, her copper hair glowing like fire in the afternoon sun. She wore a practical riding dress of deep blue calico, the hem slightly dusty from the trail. At 22, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd made her own way in the world. "Miss Novak," he managed, tipping his hat. "Didn't expect to find anyone else poking around these ruins." "I could say the same about you, Mr. Zachary." Her green eyes narrowed with suspicion. Strange to find Denver's most promising young horse trader digging through ghost town cabins. Zeke tucked the journal into his vest pocket. At 25, he'd built a modest reputation with his eye for horseflesh and fair dealings. But that wasn't what brought him to Silverhorn. He ran his fingers through his chestnut hair, brushing trail dust from the waves that perpetually refused to stay in place. "Just looking for connections to the past," he said carefully. Madeline's expression softened slightly. "Aren't we all?" Something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Zeke studied her. The determination in her posture, the intelligence in her gaze. She wasn't just passing through. She was hunting for something specific. But what? "These old mining towns hold many secrets," she continued, stepping into the cabin and glancing around. "Some worth forgetting, others worth remembering." "And which are you after, Miss Novak?" Her smile was mysterious. "That depends entirely on what's in that journal you're trying to hide." Before Zeke could respond, the distant rumble of approaching horses broke the silence. Madeline tensed, moving swiftly to the window. "3 riders," she whispered. "Coming fast." Zeke joined her, keeping to the shadows. "You expecting company?" "Not the welcome kind." Her voice had dropped to steel. "Those men work for Edgar Preston." The name hit Zeke like a physical blow. Preston owned half the mines in the territory and had been his father's business partner, and possibly his murderer, though nothing had ever been proven. "We need to leave," he said, taking her elbow. "Now." "There's another way out," Madeline replied, already moving toward the back of the cabin. "But you'll have to trust me." Trust was a luxury Zeke rarely afforded strangers. But as Preston's men dismounted outside, he realized he had little choice. "Lead the way," he said, following her through a narrow door he hadn't noticed before. They rode hard for 3 hours, following game trails and dry creek beds to throw off any pursuit. Zeke's stallion, Thunder, maintained a steady pace alongside Madeline's spirited mare. Only when they reached the sheltered valley where Zeke had made camp did they finally slow. "You ride well," he observed as they dismounted. "My father was a cavalry officer." Madeline patted her mare's sweaty neck. He believed daughters should ride as well as sons. The mention of her father triggered something in Zeke's memory. "Novak? Any relation to Captain James Novak?" Her eyes widened slightly. "He was my father." "You knew him?" "Of him," Zeke clarified, busying himself with unsaddling Thunder. "He served with my father during the war." "Before your father became a businessman and mine became a disgrace," she said bluntly. The tension between them crackled like static before a storm. Zeke turned to face her directly. "Why are Preston's men after you, Miss Novak?" Madeline sighed, reaching for her saddlebags. "The same reason you're hiding that journal. We're both looking for proof." "Proof of what?" "That Edgar Preston murdered our fathers and stole what was rightfully theirs." The words hung in the cooling evening air. Zeke had harbored the same suspicions for years, but hearing them spoken aloud by someone else, especially the daughter of his father's old friend, shifted something fundamental inside him. "I think," he said slowly, "we have much to discuss." As night fell, they sat beside a small, carefully banked fire. The mountains rose like sentinels around them, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. Zeke prepared a simple meal of beans, coffee, and jerky, which they ate in contemplative silence before he finally pulled out the journal. "I found this hidden beneath the floorboards of that cabin," he explained. It belonged to my father. Madeline leaned forward, her face painted in warm firelight. May I? He hesitated only briefly before handing it over. Something about her, perhaps the fierce determination in her eyes that mirrored his own, made him trust her when he trusted few. She opened the leather cover carefully. The Poetic Confessions of William Zachary, she read aloud. For Clara, my heart, my compass. My mother, Zeke said softly. She died when I was 10. Madeline nodded sympathetically before turning the page. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to surprise. These aren't just love poems, she said, looking up. There are coded messages here. Dates, locations. What? Zeke moved to sit beside her, their shoulders nearly touching as they hunched over the journal. Look here, Madeline pointed to a particular verse. When he mentions the silver moon reflected in twin pools, he's referring to Silverhorn and Twin Lakes. And these numbers woven into the poetry, their coordinates. Zeke stared at her in amazement. How did you figure that out so quickly? A shadow passed over her face. Because my father left similar messages. Our fathers were documenting something, Zeke. Something they discovered that got them killed. The revelation hung between them like smoke. As Madeline continued deciphering the poetic code, Zeke watched her slender fingers trace the lines his father had written. In the firelight, with her copper hair tumbling over her shoulders and her green eyes bright with intelligence, she was more than beautiful. She was a revelation. We should get some rest, he said eventually, aware of how close they were sitting. Tomorrow, we follow these coordinates. Madeline nodded, reluctantly closing the journal. Preston's men won't give up so easily. Then we'll just have to be smarter than they are, Zeke replied, offering her his bedroll. Take this. I'll keep watch first. As she settled in for the night, Madeline asked quietly, Why did you come to Silverhorn, Zeke? The real reason. He stared into the dying embers. A letter came 3 weeks ago. Anonymous. Said if I wanted to know the truth about my father, I should look for a journal hidden in the old foreman's cabin at Silverhorn. Someone wanted you to find it, she murmured. Just like someone sent me my father's old maps marked with the same location. The question is, Zeke said, are they helping us or leading us into a trap? But Madeline had already drifted into sleep, leaving Zeke alone with the stars and his troubled thoughts. Dawn broke with knife-edge clarity over the mountains. They rode out early, following the cryptic directions from William Zachary's poetry. The trail took them higher into the Rockies, through stands of aspen that shimmered like golden coins in the morning light. Your father had a way with words, Madeline commented as they paused to water the horses at a stream. Where golden sentinels tremble in autumn's breath, and water sings over stone, look to the shadow of the eagle's nest. That's how he described this exact spot. He always had a book of poetry in his saddlebags, Zeke recalled. Mother used to tease him about it. Said he was the only cowboy who could recite Wordsworth while mending fences. Madeline smiled. My father couldn't write poetry to save his life, but he kept every letter my mother sent him. After she died, he would read them to me at night. The casual intimacy of shared memories warmed Zeke more than the climbing sun. As they continued their journey, he found himself watching Madeline. The graceful way she handled her mare, how she scanned the horizon with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to reading landscapes. She wasn't just beautiful, she was capable in ways that stirred his admiration. By midday, they reached a rocky outcropping shaped remarkably like an eagle with wings spread. Below it, partially hidden by overgrowth, was the entrance to what appeared to be an old mine. This is it, Madeline breathed, dismounting. The eagle's shadow mine. It's not on any official maps. Zeke tied the horses securely. That's because officially, it doesn't exist. According to my father's journal, this was a secret operation known only to the 3 partners, my father, yours, and Preston. They approached the entrance cautiously. Years of neglect had caused partial collapse, but the supporting timbers still looked sound enough to risk entry. Zeke lit a lantern he'd packed, and they ducked inside. The tunnel extended perhaps 50 feet before opening into a small chamber. Their lantern light revealed the remains of mining equipment and a crude desk fashioned from wooden crates. Madeline immediately began searching through the scattered papers while Zeke examined the rock walls. Gold, he said, running his fingers along a vein that glittered in the lantern light. Rich deposit too. But that's not all they found, Madeline called, excitement threading her voice. She held up a yellow document. Look at this assay report. The ore here contains unprecedented amounts of both gold and a rare mineral used in steel production. Together, they're worth a fortune, Zeke finished. Enough to make 3 men wealthy beyond dreams. Or enough to make 1 man kill his partners. The truth of Preston's betrayal crystallized between them. With this evidence and the journal's coded messages documenting the partnership, they finally had proof of what had happened and why their fathers had died. Madeline continued searching while Zeke explored deeper into the chamber. Near the back wall, partially concealed behind a fallen timber, he discovered a small metal box. Madeline, he called softly. She joined him as he knelt to examine the box. It was locked, but the hasp was rusted. With careful pressure from his hunting knife, Zeke pried it open. Inside lay 2 sealed letters, a small leather pouch, and a folded document. Zeke's hands trembled slightly as he recognized his father's handwriting on one letter, addressed to him. The other bore Madeline's name in different handwriting. They knew, she whispered, taking her letter. They knew they might not survive to tell us in person. Before they could open the letters, a subtle shift in the air current made Zeke freeze. He extinguished their lantern instantly. Someone's coming, he whispered, pulling Madeline into the shadows. Heavy footsteps echoed from the tunnel, accompanied by the yellow glow of approaching lanterns. Zeke drew his revolver, positioning himself in front of Madeline. Well, a voice called from the tunnel entrance. Looks like the Zachary boy and Novak's daughter saved us the trouble of finding this place ourselves. 3 men stepped into the chamber, led by a tall figure Zeke recognized immediately. Victor Ramsey, Preston's most trusted enforcer. Mr. Preston sends his regards, Ramsey continued, his revolver already drawn. He's quite interested in what you 2 might have discovered here. Zeke felt Madeline press something into his back pocket, the letters and documents they'd found. Her silent message was clear. These couldn't fall into Preston's hands. Nothing to discover, Zeke replied evenly. Just an abandoned mine full of fool's gold and bad memories. Ramsey's laugh held no humor. Come now, young Zachary. We both know that's not true. Your fathers were quite clever, hiding their evidence as poetry and maps. But not clever enough to stay alive. The casual confirmation of murder made Zeke's blood boil, but he maintained his composure. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. What happens now? Madeline asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Now, Ramsey said, you'll hand over whatever you found, and then we'll all take a pleasant ride to meet Mr. Preston. He's very interested in concluding his business with the Zachary and Novak families once and for all. As Ramsey stepped forward, a distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Everyone froze. Blasting? One of Ramsey's men asked nervously. No active mines for miles, Ramsey replied, looking concerned. The rumbling intensified. Suddenly, Zeke understood. Cave in, he shouted, grabbing Madeline's hand. Run! They bolted toward a side passage Zeke had noticed earlier, as the first timber supports began to crack. Ramsey fired wildly after them, but the collapsing mine drowned everything in chaos. Dust filled the air as rock and timber gave way. Zeke pulled Madeline through the narrow passage, praying it led somewhere other than deeper into the collapsing mountain. Sunlight had never looked so beautiful. They emerged from a small air shaft on the mountainside, coughing and covered in dust, but alive. The main entrance had completely collapsed behind them. Ramsey? Madeline asked between coughs. Zeke shook his head grimly. No way they made it out. The whole main chamber came down. They made their way carefully down to where they'd left the horses, miraculously still tethered and unharmed. Only when they put several miles between themselves and the collapsed mine did they stop to rest. Beside a clear mountain stream, they finally examined what they'd salvaged, the letters from their fathers, the leather pouch containing gold nuggets from the mine, and a legal document establishing the 3-way partnership that Preston had later denied. It's enough, Madeline said softly. Enough to prove Preston's treachery and reclaim what belongs to our families. Zeke nodded, though his attention was on the sealed letter addressed to him. With careful fingers, he broke the wax seal and unfolded the pages. My dear son, if you are reading this, then my fears have come to pass, and I have left this world without the chance to tell you the truth. Edgar Preston is not the man I believed him to be. What began as an honest partnership has twisted into something dark. He covets what we have discovered, and I fear what he might do to possess it entirely. But this letter is not merely about business and betrayal. It is also about love, the greatest treasure I have ever found. Your mother was my heart, my reason for living. In the enclosed journal of poems, I have preserved not just our secret findings, but the story of our love. For what is gold compared to the wealth of loving and being loved in return? If fate is kind, this letter will find you grown into the man I always knew you would become. Trust your heart, Zeke, as I trusted mine. And if you should cross paths with James Novak's daughter, know that she carries her father's integrity and her mother's spirit. In troubled times, true allies are as precious as the gold we sought. Your loving father. William Zachary. Zeke looked up to find Madeline reading her own letter, tears streaming silently down her face. Without speaking, they exchanged letters, sharing the final words of fathers who had anticipated their children might one day come together. As the afternoon light softened around them, Zeke found himself studying Madeline's face. The determination in her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the compassion in her smile. In the span of 2 days, she had transformed from stranger to ally to something he wasn't yet ready to name, but felt deeply nonetheless. We should reach Denver by tomorrow evening, he said finally. Present our evidence to Judge Morrison. He's one of the few officials Preston hasn't bought. Madeline nodded, carefully folding her father's letter. And then, the question hung between them, heavy with possibilities neither had considered before their paths crossed. And then, Zeke said slowly, we honor what our fathers built. Reclaim what was stolen. Start again. Together? Her voice was soft but clear, her green eyes holding his steadily. Something shifted in Zeke's chest, a feeling both unfamiliar and completely natural. If that's what you want. Her smile was answer enough. Denver, 1872. 2 years had transformed everything. The trial of Edgar Preston had shocked Colorado society, exposing corruption that reached from mining operations to territorial government. His conviction had opened the door for Zeke and Madeline to reclaim their inheritance, not just the Eagle's shadow mine, but their father's good names. They stood now on the porch of their newly completed home, watching the sunset paint the distant Rockies in hues of gold and copper that reminded Zeke of Madeline's hair. His arm rested comfortably around her waist, her head leaning against his shoulder, the easy intimacy of a year's marriage. I received a letter from the university today, Madeline said, handing him the envelope. They're interested in publishing your father's poetry, along with the story of how it helped uncover Preston's crimes. Zeke smiled. He would have liked that, being remembered as both a businessman and a poet. It's a remarkable legacy, she agreed, turning in his arms to face him. Poetry that preserved truth, concealed evidence, and ultimately, she smiled, her hands resting on her slightly rounded belly, brought us together. The baby wasn't showing much yet, but the knowledge of its existence had filled their days with fresh wonder. Zeke placed his hand gently over hers. I've been thinking about Silverhorn, he said. The ghost town's still there, abandoned. We own the land now. What are you suggesting? Madeline asked, curiosity brightening her eyes. Maybe it doesn't have to stay a ghost town. With the mine reopened and operating fairly, there could be a community again. Families. A future. Madeline's smile widened. Rebirth from ashes. I like that idea. They stood together as the last light faded from the sky, the first stars appearing above. So much had changed since that moment 2 years ago when Zeke had found a leather-bound journal of poetry in an abandoned cabin. What had begun as a quest for justice had transformed into something far more precious. Love that echoed the words his father had written for his mother so long ago. I should write it all down, Zeke murmured. Our story. For the baby. In poetry. Madeline teased. He laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'm not the poet my father was. I don't know about that, she said softly. You have a way with words when it matters most. Inside their home, the journal of William Zachary's poetry sat in a place of honor. Its weathered pages had preserved more than evidence or memory. They had become the foundation of a new beginning, proof that love endures beyond loss, beyond betrayal, beyond even death itself. As evening settled around them, Zeke held his wife close, thinking of ghost towns reborn and forgotten poetry found. of justice long delayed but finally served, and most of all, of the unexpected ways fate brings people together across time and tragedy. "Come inside," Madeline said eventually, her hand finding his. "Tomorrow will be a busy day." "Every day with you is," Zeke replied with a smile, following her into the warmth of the home they had built together. A home founded on truth, justice, and love, poetry found in an abandoned ghost town cabin. 20 years later, Silverhorn was no longer a ghost town, but a thriving community centered around the successfully operating Eagle's Shadow Mine. Fair wages, profit sharing with workers, and careful stewardship of the land had made the Zachary Novak Mining Company a model operation throughout Colorado. On the 20th anniversary of finding the journal, Zeke and Madeline returned to the original cabin where it all began. Now restored and preserved as the town's historical center, it housed not just William Zachary's poetry, but the complete story of two families united by tragedy and redeemed by love. Their 19-year-old daughter, Clara, named for Zeke's mother and possessing Madeline's copper hair and his determined chin, had decorated the cabin with wildflowers for the celebration. Their 17-year-old son, James, named for Madeline's father and already showing Zeke's head for business, had arranged for a proper edition of the Silverhorn poems to be published for the occasion. As townsfolk gathered to commemorate the anniversary, Zeke found himself standing in the exact spot where he'd discovered the journal 2 decades earlier. Madeline joined him, her hand slipping naturally into his. 20 years, she mused, the lines around her eyes crinkling with her smile. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. And sometimes, Zeke replied, watching their children greeting arrivals, it feels like we've lived several lifetimes since then. Good ones, though, she said, leaning against him. The best ones. He kissed her temple, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together after all these years. The very best. Outside, the town of Silverhorn buzzed with life. Children playing, miners returning from their shifts, shopkeepers closing up for the evening festivities. What had once been abandoned had found new purpose, just as two lost children seeking justice had found love amidst the wreckage of their father's betrayed trust. "Dad," Clara called, waving from the doorway. "They want you to read from grandfather's poetry." Zeke nodded, squeezing Madeline's hand once more before stepping forward to share the words that had started everything. Forgotten cowboy poetry found in an abandoned ghost town cabin, transformed now into the foundation of a legacy that would endure for generations to come. In the golden light of the restored cabin, surrounded by family and friends, he opened the familiar leather journal and began to read the words that had changed everything. "For love, like gold, lies hidden in darkness, waiting for brave hearts to bring it to light. What seems abandoned may yet hold treasure. What appears lost may simply be out of sight." Madeline's eyes met his across the room, and in them, he saw reflected all they had found together: justice, purpose, family, and love that had only deepened with each passing year. Some treasures, Zeke knew, were worth far more than gold.